Hello everybody and welcome into the latest live stream. I'm still getting a little set up over here. Give me just a second. I apologize. I thought I was ready. Let's make sure everybody can see and hear me okay. All good? All right. So where we last left off, I still had cabling to do on the Threadripper here. And let's just try something out. Let me try turning on this other camera. Let me switch over to the PC camera. Oh, that's not it. I'm confused. Hold on a minute. Thought that should work. Give me a second. I will have this figured out in a moment. Oh, that's not it. It's this one. Okay, there we go. All right, so here's the case in all of its beauty. And let me just turn it on so you can get an idea of what it looks like with the lighting and everything. Because all I did at this point was was get the software and drivers configured. Pretty, right? And then we should be able to go to the PC. Yeah, there's the PC booting. And it should take us right to the desktop. There we go. So that's the shot there of what the machine's doing right this moment. You'll see I don't have any of the fans hooked up. This fan isn't turning. The front fans are not turning either. We're going to do that today, as well as hook up the front USB and all the other front port umbilicals, which I haven't done yet today. I was impressed at how the RGB software that came with the motherboard controls the RGB on the RAM as well as the RAM sockets. So this can all be synchronized together. No idea really how that works, but I'm pleased that it does. I'm gonna pull this useless SAPPHIRE, what is this? Yeah, this support beam out. It's just pointless. It's really not holding up any weight. So that's gonna go. And we're just gonna install this like any other video card. I'm not doing anything special for them. And there is a bunch of different sequences we can pick for the color, for the pattern, if we want it to bounce to music or to stay static or to turn off entirely. Those are all options for us. So yeah, so that's what's going on there. There's the desktop. I'll load it up and then we'll go back to the main camera here. Oh, there's Rob. Push the wrong button. Okay. So yes, so that's what the machine looks like right now. If you want, we can run a couple of benchmarks on it just to see how well it does. Let's go back to the PC. And let's go to this is hard for me to see on this video capture screen. Give me just a second, make a couple of adjustments here. All right, so the Heaven benchmark, that's right here. Now remember, this is mostly going to be graphics card driven. So the Threadripper, I fully expect the Threadripper build to not do as well because the graphics card is not as good as the graphics card in the Ryzen 7 1700 that I'm using to stream this with. So keep that in mind, and let's go ahead and run the Heaven benchmark and see what it does. All right, so I gotta press F9. There we go, now we're benchmarking. Okay, so now we've got our score up, and you're looking at, what is it, 179.1, a score 4510, minimum frames 34.1, max frames 335. I will also say that the machine does tend to get a bit loud when it's processing something heavily like that. So compare that to what? I suppose that's the question. I think I have some screenshots on my phone of the other results from the Ryzen 7 build that we're using now to stream this video. And let me just take a quick look here. I think it's in here somewhere. Yeah, okay, so I've got two results. One was with Prime 95 running in the background, if you recall. And let's forget that one because we don't have Prime 95 running simultaneously. So these were the numbers, if the camera will focus in on it without reflection. These were the numbers that the Ryzen 7 1700 gave us with but notice the graphics card, right? So that's a significant difference. The Ryzen 7 1700 is performing better than this, but again, it's really on the graphics card that the problem in the results is going to be seen. So let's try something else. Let's try Cinemark. Is it Cinemark? Something like that. I've got one of those over here. Let's switch back over to. Give me a second here. I'll figure this out. There's my close-up. There it is. Okay. So let's get out of this. Quit. And then let's run the Cinebench. Right here. And these are all free. You can download these and run them on your own machine if you want to compare. There's two different tests here. There's the OpenGL test and the CPU test. Let's start with the OpenGL. Remember, this Vega 64 graphics card just doesn't compare to that 1080, but let's see how it performs nonetheless. And like I say, the machine does get loud. When it starts cranking, especially on the graphics card, you'll hear those fans on the graphics card spool up. And then of course, when the CPU heats up, you'll hear the fans on the radiator spool up. All right, you'll see the score highlighted in orange on the left side there, but what it's comparing us to isn't necessarily equivalent. Let's go ahead and so up here at the top it says OpenGL. We've got a final score of 93.39. Let's go ahead and run the CPU test now. All right, so here's the 93.39. We'll run the CPU test and let's see what that does. Definitely can hear those fans start to ramp up, can't you? Let me stand in front of them, you can really hear it. And of course now the fans have quieted back down. But I think that test is already over. We're looking at 2998 CB. I don't know what that means, but for those of you who care, there's your results on Cinebench 15. All right, let me switch back over so I can see you guys. Go back over here, and yeah, I'll just give you the close-up, what the heck. So that's what it's looking like from my side. And let me go down here. So I think the other thing I've got to do will be to see what happens when they load the Samsung Magician software. I think the Samsung Magician software is going to not work because we've got these drives in RAID. So let's close this down. And we'll close this. And of course, we can bring up the task manager and then go to more details, performance, CPU. Yeah, let's open the resource monitor. Let's look at it this way. Well, that wasn't giving me what I was hoping for. All right. Let's go to Samsung. Oh, I don't have an internet connection. Gosh darn it. Okay. Well, that's all right. I'll figure out another way. All right. So let me minimize this back down. Well, it's almost like I need two monitors for this. Let me grab a flash drive with Samsung Magician on it. Give me just a second here. All right, sorry about that. Had to find a flash drive. All right, let's go ahead and plug this in here. And then let me switch you back over. And Oh, that's not what I wanted. These are all the driver packages that were downloaded and installed here. All right, Samsung Magician Installer. Let's see what happens. Now, ordinarily, you would install the software once and it would recognize all three or as many Samsung SSD, M.2, or NVMe drives that you have. But because we've got three Samsung Evo 500s in a RAID 0 array, it's tricking the motherboard into thinking it's just one hard drive, and I think it will affect the Samsung software as well. I think it's going to say it's not going to find anything, but I'm very curious. I honestly have no idea what level the software works at. So it says SSD array 1. That's very good. It does recognize that there's an array. It does not recognize the interface. It says unable to detect. AHCI mode is not applicable. The trim status is enabled and rapid mode is not supported. It's got a total capacity of 1,396 gigabytes. Remember, that's three drives at 500 gigs each. And then when you hit that drop down, this is where if you had multiple Samsung drives, they would appear down here, and then you would have all of your options here and down here. We could do the performance benchmark on this just to see what it'll do. We're going to be looking at the sequential and the random right down here as soon as this result is ready. And remember, you can run a similar test if you have a Samsung drive. You should have the Samsung Magician software. Also make sure that you have the latest firmware installed and that you're in AHCI mode. If you've got an NVMe drive in Windows, be sure to download the Samsung NVMe driver to optimize your performance rather than using the Microsoft driver. And we'll have a result here very shortly. Someone's mentioned driver booster in the chat room. I strongly advise you guys to stay far away from driver booster. Unless you like adware and spyware on your computer, you should avoid anything that's not open source that's free. The driver booster is not an open source program, and so you should stay away from it. Use something like Snappy Driver Installer. And remember, anytime you mess with drivers, unless you know what you're doing, you could take a machine that's working perfectly fine and try to improve it by updating drivers by listening to these complete strangers on the internet with the best of intentions, crash your computer, and then have to call a guy like me and pay me to come fix it. That's why I always say people with the best of intentions have pretty much paid for my car. So don't get yourself in over your head. If your machine's working, leave it alone. That would be the best advice I can give you. If you're somebody who likes to toy around and fix problems, well then, full steam ahead, my friend. So we got read speeds of 5,609, write speeds of just over 5,000. And this isn't 3 times faster, but it's more than 2 times faster. And that's what I would expect out of a 3-drive RAID 0 array. On a regular mechanical hard drive, this number and this number would be in the below 200. It'd be somewhere between 120 and 180 on both sides here. And with a regular SSD, you'd be looking around 550 or below on both sides. With an NVMe, you'd be looking, depending on the NVMe, upwards of 2,600 on one side, 2,100 on the other. And with 3 NVMe drives in RAID 0, as you can see, we've more than doubled, but not quite tripled, because RAID has an overhead. The more drives you add, the faster you go, but it's not exponential. You do reach a point of diminishing returns where, as you add more drives, the performance you're getting back in return for that isn't worth the expense. And of course the risk. With a RAID 0, if any single drive fails, we lose the entire array. So it's always important to have a backup. In my case, I'll be making an AORUS disk image backup, which I talked about in a previous broadcast, so I won't go back through that now. But that is working exactly like I would expect it. And was surprised the Samsung Magician software works as well as it does. You can download the Samsung Magician software. You don't need to have a Samsung SSD. Although, you know, just to run the performance tests, I don't know, there's other tools you can download if you want to test your hard drive, such as Crystal Disk Mark, which will give you your speeds. And then, of course, Crystal Disk Info, both open source freeware, great utilities, highly recommended. I did not install the driver install on this because it's very, very boring. So I just took care of that offline. Well, not offline, but you know, away from the podcast or the broadcast here. I'm picking all the wrong words today. Let's go back. There's a list of parts that make up the system. If you're curious what the drives are, what the CPU is, just check the video description below the notes. Let's go back to, let's go ahead and turn this off. Let me just hit the power button. That should cycle it through the shutdown cycle. And we can finish getting the cabling done. We've got fans to hook up, front port umbilicals still need to get hooked up. It just clicked off, that's good. And then I don't need this USB drive anymore because that just had the Samsung Magician software on it. And let's flip the switch to off. And now I can continue. Let me get you the closer camera view, which is right here. And let's take a look at what we've got going on in here. So we've got to get, let me just step over here. We've got to get these cables hooked up. So the cables I still have remaining, I've got the HD audio cable. We can get that one out of the way. We can actually run this one. Just take a look here. We're going to run that through here, I think. No, maybe I'll run it below. So all I'm doing is I'm just going to run it below, up by the power supply. Oh, I like how I can go all the way back on this case. I like that. And then audio is going to be right in this corner, right back in here. I can't really see, it's very, very dark, so I can't tell which end is up. There is a pin missing. That way the plug only goes in a certain direction, and the missing pin appears to be on the bottom, so that's how I know how to orient that. But I like that there's a cutaway right down there to hide that cable. That's brilliant. Really like that. Well, there's a lot about this case I am liking. All right, I've got the USB 3 cable here. Now that might be worth, let's see, where are we gonna plug in? So for USB 3, it looks like we gotta go right there. So once again, looks like the same process. I can get up underneath. Like this, I think. I don't know. I gotta come around and see. Oh, I can go further over. I can go all the way. The question is whether or not I want to run this in front of or behind all these power cables. I think I want to run it, I guess we're going to run it in front of them. And that's got a notch, so it only plugs in one way. There's that cable. I suppose I could come up through here if I really wanted to. There's a hole right up in here. Because this cable, the USB cable, is so, the connector is so large, it just kind of sticks out. There's not much I can do about that. Looks like no matter how I do it, it's going to stick out. What else we got back here? Oh, we've got a USB 2, which I'm guessing can also run the same way. It's going to go under here somewhere. Let's see, is it going to go on this side or the other side? Yeah, we'll have it go on that side. It's got a missing pin, which is in the upper left. So that should just go right on there. All right, so that is USB 2. We've got one connector left. It's another USB 2? That doesn't make any sense. How can I have two USB 2s? Oh, I think one of the USB 2s is for the lighting control, maybe? 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 So right up in the back here, you can't really see it, but there's a box. And there's a bunch of cables coming into it. And I think one of these USB 2s is going to give us lighting controls for the case, which I also have not yet hooked up. So on top of all the lights you saw in here, there's still lights up here that haven't been turned on and lights down the side I haven't turned on. So if you're going to try and sleep in a bedroom with this thing on, it's probably going to be a very bright night light. The good news is you can use the software to turn these lights off, so keep that in mind. All right, let me see. Where did I do with that USB cable? I shoved it in there, I thought. I think that should be about it right there. I think. Ooh, I was very close. I think I'm going to continue on to the other side here. This cable's going to just barely reach, which is good. That'll make, when you have a cable that barely reaches, that means you don't have a lot of slack, which means cable management is going to be super easy. At least for that one cable anyway. So that goes on to our other USB 2 header, just like that. And that looks good. Looks good. We have a bunch of spare fan headers here. I've got a SATA connector that's going to power the fans and the RGB lights. And so I need to go to the motherboard box. Actually, it's not the motherboard box, it's the there's the box of cables, my ALCHEMY 2.0 cables from BitFenix that are compatible with the Seasonic Prime power supply series that we have here. And we just want to get a standard SATA cable out of here. That's Molex. It's 8-pin. Molex. Oh, nope. That's a video card. SATA. We have one. Hallelujah. All right. I think I'm done with this. I don't think we need a Molex. Something's telling me I do, but I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. So let me just set this back over here for now so I don't knock everything over. Okay, so I just need to find a spot on the back of the power supply. It looks like so it looks like to do this, I either need to jam my hand way down in there, which isn't actually that bad. I guess I can do that. Or I need to take the power supply temporarily out, but I think I can make it work. Okay, that's done. And then we're just going to take this plug here. And we're going to plug it in just like that. And then, of course, let's see, I think all these fans, I think the rear fan and the 3 front fans are hooked up to the fan controller. The 3 radiator fans are hooked into the water pump. This cable management is going to be so easy on this with these little Velcro ties that you can run these cables down these tracks. I'm looking forward actually to getting that done. But we got to make sure everything works first before we do that. So let's fire it back up. Let's get the switch back on here. Let's turn it on. Now I've got lights up here I didn't have before. But these lights aren't working for some reason. I know there's some buttons. I thought there was buttons on here that you could press to cycle through different options, I thought. Could be wrong. So these series of lights are lighting up here. These fans are turning. The rear fan is now turning. I wonder if I have these lights on upside down. Yeah, I did. That's why they didn't light up. This is a magnetic strip. So you don't have to place it here, but it's a really good place for it to be, and why not? It just will stick there magnetically. Put that flush right up against the case. And remember, we're going to have a case window on this, and we can adjust the color of this to match whatever color we decide or whatever pattern we decide to go with. And I thought there were buttons on this, but it must be only software controlled, so we'll have to download the software. But that is what that looks like, right? You can see that lighting strip there, and then of course there's one up at the top. If we move this up, you can see those lights up there. There is no power LED on this case. What there is instead is a hard drive activity LED, and if I bring the case down so you can see where the power switch is, you'll see it blinks every time there's hard drive activity. I thought for sure we hooked up a power LED. I mean, I know it was all one piece. And it sure looks like there's cables for a power LED. So unless it's lighting up somewhere else I don't see. And then of course if we cut the lights a little bit here, you can really get to see the lighting a lot better. The darker it is, of course, the better that lighting is going to look. And of course we can change the lighting to be one solid color or to flicker or flash, rotate around, etc., etc. All right, I think all that remains now is just any final testing and the cable management, and then I'll be able to button it back up. I was really impressed with the temps. Let me show you what kind of temps we're getting on this. Let's go back to the PC. And let's try running, let's see. Let's bring up Prime 95, and then you're going to hear those fans ramp up when Prime 95 runs. That's going to process 100% of all 32 threads. And then let's bring up HW monitor. Let's take a look at what our temps are. Let's let that run for a few minutes and see. Okay, so we're going to watch this temperature area right in here. Like I say, we have Prime 95 running. If we bring that up in the background just to keep us reminded that that's running. And it looks like we've got about 127 on the clock. Let's let it run until 145. So while it's running, if you have any questions in the chat, this would be a good time to ask, and we'll just sort of bide our time while this test runs, and we'll see what our max temperature is. What was the most frustrating thing for that build? I suppose just putting the heat sinks back onto the M.2 drives was too easy to screw it up. I mean, I put all three of those heat sinks on incorrectly, and if I had turned it on with the heat sinks grounding out against the connectors on the M.2 drives, I don't know if it would have damaged it or not, and I don't want to know. Thankfully, one of the viewers had thought that perhaps I did that and encouraged me to double check it, and I'm glad I did, because I put all three of the heat sinks on incorrectly. And it's so easy to do it incorrectly, and it fits and it does everything exactly the way it should. I think that GIGABYTE could have made this process a lot easier by bending the tabs on the heatsink so that they swung open, so that the bent tab acted as a hinge, rather than pulling the whole tab out of the slot, which then means when you put it back into slot, if you go just a millimeter below that slot, you're in between the M.2 drive connector and the socket. And wouldn't you know it, that tab fits right in there. You would think that it wouldn't fit all the way in. It would prevent me from putting the heatsink back on, but no, it let me do it. So I'd say that was probably the most frustrating thing, and it was so easy for GIGABYTE to prevent that from occurring. But, you know, again, this is part of the learning process. You know, it doesn't bother me that I made a mistake in front of 750 people watching. What bothers me is that with all my experience that I didn't know, and how is somebody who's never built a computer before supposed to know? And so a lot of these things could be engineered just to be a little bit better with regards to only working in one direction, just like connectors that have pins missing so that you can't plug it in the wrong way, connectors that have different shapes and pinouts so they can only be plugged into one place in one direction. And the heat sinks for the M.2 drives are a great addition, but the way that they applied them could have been improved. So it wasn't that frustrating, but it was very surprising. So always something new to learn in this industry. You'll see that CPU is staying nice and cool too. You looking at those temps? Spectre 7734 has contributed 20 New Zealand dollars. Thank you, Spectre, for your contribution. Eric Gernstrom says the old man from Sweden says hi. There's only one old man in Sweden. Hi, old man in Sweden. Stuart wants to know if I'm going to leave the RGB multicolored or go for an all-over color. I don't know yet. I'll play with that. Do you have to put a sound blaster into the case? It's got a sound card that's better than a sound blaster built onto the motherboard. If you want to know what any of the parts are that make up the system, I have tediously spent hours putting together a list with links in the video description. I would really appreciate it if you guys would just click your mouse and read the video description. You would sure really help me out a lot if you would do that. The EKWB heat sinks are a real pain to install. Yeah, I'll be installing, I think, one of those on the Ryzen 7 1700 build. So they're going to get used, but that'll be a future video, saving it. Tech Baron says, I always have a drink. Well, I talk a lot, and I'm also, what is it, 114 degrees outside Fahrenheit? Tends to make you a little thirsty, my friend. Drink it up. Are there any more computer club talks in the works? Arizona is a place where retired pensioners who live in a colder climate come out for the winter months to get away from the cold climate and stay in Arizona. We call them snowbirds. They're generally here from about October until March. My presentations are to these folks, and so they will only occur, generally speaking, from October until March. So, with regards to presentations, you can expect presentations from me. Usually, it could be 2 to 6 times a year between in the fall and winter. Just put it to you that way. So between October and March, if I'm going to do one, that's when you'll see it. "114 degrees is hot? Well, then you should be here when it's 122, because I got news for you. 122 is hotter than 114. We haven't hit summer yet. This is still spring. Do snowbirds equal Canucks? There are some Canadians, but mostly it's people from Minnesota and Iowa, Alaska, just the colder climates. I mean, they come from all over, but mostly they're US citizens. But there are some Canadians. Gunnar Sandberg says hello from Sweden. Samuel Ramos says hello from New York. Alaska from Arizona, that's a bit of distance. Just a lot of people from Alaska come to Arizona for the winter. A lot of people. Rob Gurley has contributed $5. Thank you, Rob. Thanks for your contribution. Johnny ICT Ben says hi from the UK. Lance Ripplinger says hi, y'all. Of course, thanks to all my moderators doing their moderating today. Rusty Shackelford, Douglas Biggers, everybody. Thank you for keeping it civil in the chat room. Mark Cresswell's contributed £9.99, says, you helped me build my research rig. I processed terabytes of climate model data in satellite image. It's still fast, has never crashed. That's awesome. You can't beat building your own computer, man, I'm telling you. You'll never want another pre-built again. And Catherine Hannah Hauserman is moderating today. Thank you as always. Michael Ram says hello from Germany. Boy, you can really hear those fans now. I mean, that thing is working. Listen to that. It seems to be coming from the radiator. Those are the loud fans, I guess. The case fans don't seem to be making any noise at all, the front or rear. And the graphics card I thought might be a part of the issue, but these radiator fans I think are really drowning out. But look how well it's working. So, and we were still seeing really, really low temps when you consider we're flat out 100% now for, well, for 10 minutes now. The fan curve in the BIOS doesn't control the fans on the radiator, but thank you for playing. I want the radiator to turn the fans up. I don't want my motherboard to turn my radiator fans up. That's the water block is doing the job it's intended to do. If you bypass the water block and the technology that the engineers built into it, then you effectively reduce your cooling capacity. So I prefer to hook it up the way the engineers intended. Now the motherboard manufacturer will probably tell you they can control it better. But the problem is, if you have a heat-related problem with your CPU and it's an expensive CPU, who are you going to blame? Because I'll tell you, the manufacturer of the water block will blame you for not hooking it up the way they recommend. So I'm not playing around with it. If it gets a little loud on occasion, I don't mind it. And then of course we have the covers off of it still. So once the covers are put back on, that'll quiet it down a bit. But how often do you ever run 32 threads at 100%? You know, I mean, it's really, really working it. So let's stay practical here, guys, and let's understand fully what's happening. Using it for web browsing and even live streaming and things like that, those fans would never kick on that loud because you'd never push the CPU that hard. Ricky Saunders has contributed £1.99, says, nice build. Well, thank you, Ricky. All right, if we let it go another 2 minutes or so, that'll be a total of 15 minutes. And you can see our temperatures are fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Irving is really, really obsessed with the Sound Blaster software that came with the motherboard. I think Irving should take a moment to go to GIGABYTE's website and download the manual and read about the sound card that it's included. That would be the best thing I would suggest for you, Irving. Lance says, it sounds like that Enermax all-in-one is working really well. Yeah, you can really hear it, can't you? Joey wants to know if the fans are connected directly to the power supply. No, we haven't done that since the 90s. A fan that's connected directly to the power supply will not adjust in speed. It won't run quiet 1 minute and loud the next. If a fan runs quiet and then runs loud, that means the voltage being fed to the fan is altering. When you run straight out of a power supply, the voltage will be unchanged at 5 or 12 volts. Most fans run on 12 volts, so it'll run full speed all the time, non-stop. So when we stop Prime 95, you'll hear these fans quiet back down to basically whisper mode, because it won't need to be so aggressively cooling the radiator to get that liquid down off the heat it's drawing away from the internal heat shield off of the CPU. This is all very logical. You just really think it through, and it all starts to make sense. Right now, Prime 95 is running all 32 threads at 100%. This computer could not possibly work the CPU could not work any harder. It is at its maximum right now. The temps are at the highest they can be. So the whole point of this exercise, and what I'm trying to demonstrate to all of you watching, is how cool this Enermax all-in-one cooler is keeping the CPU when I'm pushing the CPU to its limits. Granted, we're not overclocking, but right now we are pushing it to its engineering limits as it is stock out of the box, and those temps are incredibly low when you consider that. You've seen me run this test on other processors with other cooling solutions, and we really haven't seen, I think the computer just went to sleep on me here. Hold on, let's wake it up. The computer, any of the other machines that we've run this test on have not seen temps that low. This is very impressive. But you know, the downside, of course, is the noise that accommodates that effective cooling. Stuart Barrett's contributed 10 pounds. He says, thank you, Kerry, for all the knowledge you share and truth about products and the way it's done. Well, thank you, Stuart. I'm glad you appreciate, you get what I'm trying to do here. I really appreciate that. Okay, so where are we at now? We've been running over 15 minutes on this. And our maximum temps, let's see, what have we got here? Now, if I step over here, so I want you guys to hear this. I'm gonna come over to Prime 95, go to test, and then stop the test. Then when I hit stop, I want you to listen to the fans and watch how quickly the temps drop even further. Watch how fast this happens. Okay, here we go. Just quieted right up. We can exit Prime 95 now. And you can see, based on this, that the highest temp we hit was 66 Celsius. That's really impressive, really, really impressive. And if you're interested, excuse me, if you're interested in voltages and everything else that's on the screen, I'll slowly scroll down here so you guys can see. Here we've got another set of temperatures, reaching a max of 67 degrees Celsius, which is still very, very cool. We've got wattages. Got our processor utilization, which we maxed out at 100% for almost 20 minutes there. I think it was about 20 minutes. All the different minimums and maximums on each core's speed. And then, of course, GPU information, all right there for you to check out. So, yeah, I'm very happy with the way it's performing right now. I haven't had to do any actual work, though. And, of course, benchmarks are pointless as far as I'm concerned. What matters is how well the machine does what you need it to do, how quickly it does it, and what your impression of what you as the user, what your impression of the machine is. Does it seem faster to you? Does it seem louder? Does it seem, and the only way you're going to know that, I guess it's like trying to explain how comfortable a car is, right? You can look at a car and say it's a sexy car. You can watch lap times, say it's a fast car. You can listen to the engine roar. But what you don't know is, does it feel faster? When you get in the car and you push the accelerator pedal down, does it feel faster than the car you have now? Was it meeting your expectations? Does the car turn out to be reliable, or do you have to bring it into the shop all the time? Is the ride comfortable, or do you feel every bump in the road? What kind of gas mileage are you going to get? So a lot of these things you don't know until you actually own the car, and you can do all the testing, but how often does the miles per gallon sticker on the window of the car match the actual miles per gallon the owner gets when the owner buys it and actually drives it? Those numbers are often pretty far apart. So the manufacturers are estimating mileage based on testing, but testing doesn't emulate real world use. And real world use depends on where you live in the world and what you do with your car, right? So it's not as though there's any one number that's going to isolate what you're going to get. The only way you know what you're going to get is to do it. So therefore, the single best test of anything is you actually using it. Benchmarks for the purposes of performance monitoring are pointless, because again, if the end user doesn't notice a difference, then you've wasted the end user's money. If what you're looking for is a means to brag on the internet about how much faster your machine is because of the numbers you got in some benchmark competing against other complete strangers on the internet, that's a hobby. It might be fun for you, but it's a complete waste of time to most people since it's meaningless. And don't let me stop you. I mean, feel free to do it. You're not hurting anybody, but it lacks any real accomplishment as far as I'm concerned. The world still goes around. You didn't make the world a better place. You didn't help a community member. You didn't get any work done. You didn't contribute to society by competing with other people about megahertz. So but if that's how you find your fun, that's fine. I like to find fun in doing both. I like to be able to find the fun in helping the community, helping my neighbor, sharing my knowledge. I'm not really interested in competition, honestly. It seems egotistical, but that's just me. Mitch has joined us in the chat. Hey, Mitch, welcome in. Hey, Mitch, were you able to get your Cronus image to work? It's time for Kerry to try water cooling like EK Fluid Gaming A240G. So the problem with doing any sort of custom water block is, first of all, you can spend upwards of $800 to $1,000 just to get all the parts. Second, you're going to be doing plumbing, which is going to involve some leakage and spillage. It's got to, and you've got to be very careful with that. Second, you're going to have to do maintenance on that pump. Recommended every year you drain it and clear out any bacteria or algae that be growing in it, and then refill it again, which opens up another opportunity for spillage and leaks. And it is a pointless exercise unless you need some form of extreme cooling, or you're really into the aesthetics of a showpiece that you're gonna, bring to some sort of an expo to display. If it was a marketing thing for a company, or I don't know, it's just a hobby and you've got nothing else better to do. I really don't have any interest to become a plumber. It's nothing I ever wanted to do. I have enough dealing with leaky faucets and running toilets to add that to my computer. This is not appealing to me. When we started with computers, you got to remember, I started when a computer was a big box with a CRT, and you got everything you needed to do what you needed to do. Nobody thought to add pointless lights. Nobody really thought to push the computer harder in order to gain a few more megahertz because we were so happy to have the computer. It's sort of like, you know, when the car first came out, Model T didn't go very fast. It wasn't really four-wheel drive, but you were happy to have a car. And now, you know, we've got cars with hydraulic systems that bounce them up and down, and stereos that shake the whole neighborhood. And it's very little, and it's nothing to do with a car. It has nothing to do with transportation. It's just like people become bored and they have too much money in their pockets. And I think that's one of the ways you can tell how well society is doing, is look at all the needless crap people invest their money into. And here in America, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Yeah. For me, I try to always maintain being practical. I've made an exception on this build because it's just a crazy build by going with the lights, but then to add a custom water loop to that, I'll never say never, but I don't really have any desire to add more work to my workload and then to have to maintain it on an annual basis. Nobody's gonna, you know, I'm not out to impress anybody. I don't care if you're impressed or not. I think more people need to learn how to stop caring if other people will give you their approval. I'm proud of it. I think it works damn well so far. It's impressed me through the entire process. And if it doesn't impress you, it's not my problem. Did I finish the GlenFittich? Yeah, I finished it. Yes, I did, Keith. It was, I was surprised how much I liked that, but it's very expensive. I was at the store the other day, and I think I took a picture of it with my phone. I couldn't believe how much money that bottle was. Well, not that little bottle, but a regular size bottle of that GlenFittich. I know I've got it on my phone. Yeah. So that's the, wait a minute, I can't see. Yeah, $55.99, so $56 for that bottle of GlenFittich. So I think I can find it cheaper somewhere else, but wow, that's a lot of money for a single bottle of booze, I'll tell you. Keith says, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, you and me both. Thank you for sending it. It was very thoughtful of you. When are you going to be putting the names on it? Well, after I get the cable management, so the process has been, you know, building it, getting the software installed, getting the drivers, then doing what we've done today. I still need to test these USBs, make sure everything's working like it should, make sure that the RGB software is installed and working like it should. And then I can finally tie up those cables and put the rear panel on. And then before I put the glass panel back on, the final thing, I'm going to put everybody's name right down this center white stripe here. And then I'm going to also, when I have them in it, my engraver's been really busy. I'm going to find out from my engraver if I can ship this white piece to him and have him actually engrave the names. Because I'm thinking once I put the labels with everybody's name, he can engrave right on top of it and then peel the labels off, and then all the names will be permanently part of this case. I think that would be really, really cool. I don't know if he can do it or not. So at the very least, what we're calling the naming ceremony, that'll probably be next week sometime. I still have to, there's a lot of administrative work that has to go with who donated, how much, and what name they want displayed before I even know what names to put on it. Because somebody may not want their name to be displayed. They may want a different name or a handle or a business name. and people who donated more may get 2 or 3 names displayed. So I still have to get all that organized. I haven't done it yet. But it won't take that long. Once I sit down and open an Excel spreadsheet, I just have a bunch of different emails I have to tie together to figure out who's who, and then we'll be ready for the naming ceremony. I was really excited to see that NZXT has made a micro ATX version of this case. I think it's the 400i, if I'm not mistaken. It'd be fun to build a little micro ATX machine as a little brother to this. But one thing at a time, I have to get this done first. Have I been recovering ever since? Well, you got to remember, I'm still running a computer repair business, and when a customer calls me, you know, I was originally planning to do this video on Wednesday, but when customers call, I have to take care of those customers first and foremost. And if by the time I get back, if I don't have time to get the studio set back up and still have light, then it gets put off to the next day. And when the next day comes, you know, I had to go to the DMV, I had to get a new driver's license, I had to wait in line there, I didn't know how long that was going to take. So, and then after that, I had to run a couple of errands. I had to stop at 4 different places. And so by the time I got back, I got the mail, went through the mail, and then I said, there's no way I can get this whole thing set up and start now. It's 5 o'clock at night. Although our days are longer now with the summer coming, you know, right around the corner, it's still just not enough light. And so I lost Wednesday and Thursday to filming, and I just thought more people will probably be home on Friday anyway, so they'll probably have more viewers. And then I still have a bunch of videos waiting for editing, which I have also not had time to sit down and do yet either. So there's no boredom here. That's why when we talk about things that people do for fun, like making their car bounce up and down, I think it's moronic, because I think your time and money could be spent and invested with a much better return instead of so selfishly. But you have to understand that I'm coming from a perspective of being buried in work, and I don't have the luxury of having all this money sitting around and nothing to do. Perhaps my attitude would be different if I did, but I just think it's a very selfish thing to do. I think that if you have money to do that and you have time to do that, then you have money and time to contribute to your community. I step outside of my home and there's garbage all over the streets. I see people just chuck stuff right out the window of their car. Fast food bags, beer cans, water bottles. I see full water bottles, never been opened, just sitting out in the sun. And so the other day I was walking the dogs and it was garbage day and people had their garbage cans all out in front of their homes. And not one neighbor, not a single neighbor that I witnessed picked up any of the garbage in the street inches away from their trash can. So as I'm walking the dogs, I see a water bottle, I pick it up, I take 5 steps and I put it in some stranger's trash can. How hard was that? That little thing helps me feel better about where I live, because I don't want to live in a garbage dump. But it also frustrates me that these people have all the money to be buying all this stuff and then they just throw it out in the street. It's very selfish. And so I just don't live in that selfish world, and I refuse to participate in it. And I don't say anything, I just pick it up. And it takes, like if you took a stopwatch and you saw me walk across the street and pick up these cans and things and throw them in the trash, it would take less than 30 seconds from the time I left to the time I walked back. I don't know why nobody has time to do it. I also don't understand why when it's garbage day and people put their cans out, that they don't pick up the trash right in front of their own house and stick it in the can that's literally feet away. They just don't care. But some of these people are the same people that'll invest in water cooling blocks, the same people that'll invest in a hydraulic system for their car. But within their own community, it's as if, hey, it's not my problem. It's my house, but I don't care if I live in a garbage dump. Well, I do. And so I pick up after people around me because they won't do it. And I won't say anything to them because it'll just make me an enemy. So I just pick it up. And again, it takes 30 seconds. It's not a big effort. And if I see cans, I keep the cans because I get about $30 for about 25 pounds of cans. So every can I see is free money. I pick them up, I save them about every 5-6 months. I have a big bin and I just crush the cans, and when the bin gets filled, it's about 30 pounds, 25, 30 pounds of cans, and I get about $30 in cash to trade those cans in. So it's karma, right? I'm getting paid to do something I would do anyway, so it works out well. And a garbage man here, he rides in a truck that has an electronic arm that picks the can up. The garbage man never gets out of the truck. And so, of course, if people have loose garbage in their can and it's a windy day, as he's dumping the trash, the wind may blow some of it outside of the truck and into the street. The garbage man will not pick that up. The garbage man won't get out of his truck. So. You guys have any questions for me? Ian Scott Johnson said, that's a real shame, Kerry. That attitude just doesn't happen in my hometown in Scotland. And my immediate neighbors all help each other all the time. I was helping one today with an iPad in his car. Yeah, you know, it's not America, it's Phoenix. I want to make that clear. There are different cultures that exist within America. The Southern culture is much different from the Northwest culture, which is much different from the California culture, which is different from the New Mexico culture, which is different from the Midwest culture. It's all different cultures. And the Northeast has a culture all their own, and everything's very different in some places. I think the problem is I was raised in Michigan, so I have a back east attitude. And some people argue Michigan is the Midwest, but Michigan's on the Eastern time zone. It's considered the eastern part of the United States. And more importantly, there's a very much an Eastern attitude, which is to treat people how you're treated. It means you're a jerk to people that treat you like a jerk, and you're nice to people that treat you nice. That's how I was raised. And be it right or wrong, out in Phoenix, it just everybody's in a bubble, and nobody exists but them. So they will stop in the middle of the road with no consideration of all the cars they're blocking behind them. They will get in the passing lane on the freeway and not pass anybody, and be passed on the right and the left, on the carpool lane and in the middle lane, and be completely oblivious to it, think they're not doing anything wrong, or perhaps not even give the people around them any consideration whatsoever, because they're the only people on the road in their mind. That road is theirs, it belongs to them, and if they want to throw trash on it, if they want to do whatever they want to do, that's their attitude. And so it's very much something that happens in Phoenix. A friend of mine recently moved to Dallas, and a neighbor had come over and brought them a little welcome basket, you know, with some fruits and flowers and things like that, something like that. And I said, I knew it. It never happened to my friend in Phoenix. One day in Dallas, welcome to Dallas, we're your neighbors, it's nice to meet you. And I was so happy to hear that, because I've always sort of hypothesized that it was a Phoenix cultural problem, and that verified it for me, beyond my own personal experience. Kerry, Glenfiddich is only $25 at Total Wine. Well, that can't be the same size bottle if it's $25. I mean, there's not going to be that big of a price difference. I'm thinking the cleanest city in the planet is Dallas, Texas. Well, you know, I've been to Dallas. I didn't think it was all that clean. Where I was very impressed was Chicago. Not South Chicago, but downtown Chicago is extraordinarily clean. And everybody's so friendly in Chicago, too. Very friendly people. But again, I'm not talking about the bad parts. I'm talking about downtown, main Chicago. Kerry, some New Yorkers are nice to others. When you move, they come and greet you and welcome you. I found New Yorkers to be very nice. Yeah. There's when you watch TV and movies, New Yorkers have this. They're often portrayed as, and when we talk New Yorkers, we're not talking upstate New York. We're talking Manhattan. We're talking New York City. They're often portrayed as being rude or mean, and I did not experience that from anybody. Even when I watched how other people interacted, just complete strangers interacting with each other on the subway, there was, you know, it would say that the subway smelled like urine. It did not. Subway was clean. So my trip to New York was a very good trip. Very good trip. I was dating a girl, and she went to I think she went to Macy's, and I had a meeting, and then I left the meeting, and I was walking in front of Madison Square Garden. And in New York City, the buildings are tall and they're next to each other. So you can't, like, if you're looking for something, you can't look between the buildings. There's no space. So you don't know what's on the other block, right? So I'm accustomed to being able to, to do. So I'm walking and it's occurring to me that I can't find Macy's and I'm not sure if I go left or right without actually walking around the entire block to see what's on the other side. So I'm walking in front of Madison Square Garden. There's people everywhere. So Madison Square Garden is here on my left. And I do this. I swear, I did it for like 2 seconds. This guy walking the other way comes up to me and goes, "What are you looking for?" I said, "I'm looking for Macy's." "Yeah, around the corner to your right." And then he just keeps walking. Like you could see he was in a hurry, but he stopped because he saw the momentary look of puzzlement. He asked if I needed help, and he quickly gave me the answer and continued on his way. Beautiful, amazing. I was on a subway, and this lady came on with a baby sitting on her lap, maybe 2-year-old baby, maybe not even that. This businessman is in a suit. He comes in, he sits down opposite. Train stops, he goes to get off. The doors open, and you only have a few moments before those doors close. He stops, and he's like, Gucci, Gucci, goo to the baby, smiles, and then walks off and goes on his merry way to his business. Whatever he was all, 3-piece suit. Complete stranger. It's like, wow, this is incredible. And the other thing that impressed me, so here in Phoenix, you'll have people, they hold signs, homeless, any money can help, and they're everywhere. And you can't tell who's a scammer from who's honestly needing the help. But you can't go a mile without them being on every corner of every major street and every freeway ramp. So in New York, I was pleasantly surprised on what they do, which is they will get on the subway starts to move, and they'll go car to car, and what I saw was very, very nice. It was, "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt your day. I'm out of work and I've got some children at home that I'm trying to feed, and if you can contribute to anything that would certainly help, and I'm sorry if I really apologize for the interruption, and I hope you have a great day." And then they'd walk their way through the train car and go on to the next one. And I thought, wow, how nice, and that was pleasant. And one person came on and said, "I'm not asking for money, just if you have an apple or a banana or something in your lunch that you don't want or you're willing to part with, I don't have any food and I would appreciate it." Now that felt genuine to me. That felt like, okay, this isn't somebody who just wants money to go buy drugs. This person's genuinely hungry, and they were very kind. Out here is almost like a sense of entitlement when they hold that sign. It's like, feel sorry for me and give me money. And some of these people you see smoking cigarettes, and you're like, well, you got money for cigarettes, or they got new shoes on. Yeah. They had a story out here. There was a little old lady holding up a sign, and everybody feels bad. Little old lady, just wrinkled, gray hair, frail. And they followed her after she left. She had her wad of cash that everybody had given, and she went to a brand new car. And this guy was with the news, and he put the microphone, and he's like, how do you justify taking money from people when you've got a brand new car? And she's like, "Get out of my face." And she pushed him. She wasn't such a nice little old frail anymore. She was a mean, vicious little thing. And it was like, wow. So when I see those, because I can't tell the fake ones from the real ones, I don't contribute to that. But if I was in a fast food place and there was somebody that was looking to eat, I would pay for their meal, no problem. But I'm not going to give them cash, because they're probably just drugs or alcohol in most cases. They had a story where a guy was out in front of a dealership holding a sign, and the manager of the dealer, or the owner of the dealer, said, "Hey, I'll pay you $12 an hour to wash all the cars on the lot." And the guy says, "No, I make more than $12 an hour doing this." So the car dealer put up a sign. You can Google these stories. The car dealer put up a sign, a big sign that said, "Please do not give the panhandler any money. I offered him a job." And he says he makes more money from you guys than if he has a job. So please don't give him any money. It was short. It wasn't that wordy, but that's effectively what it said. And so, hey, it doesn't take any work. Just sit out there and hold the sign. At least when they're out there, when it's 115, 120 degrees, putting the time in. There's a Facebook page dedicated to a guy here in Phoenix. For about 5 or 6 years now, he's been holding a sign that says, "Help me bury my son." Don't you think after 5 or 6 years, he's buried his son by now? And he moves from place to place, and they made a whole Facebook page dedicated to this guy, and people will confront him constantly. Like, And they post it on Facebook. They'll put their camera phones out and they'll say, why do you do this? Why are you ripping people off? Why are you lying? And he'd just be like, have a nice day. And he walks away and doesn't stop him. He just keeps moving. It's free, tax-free money. The government has no record of it. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to pay taxes on it. It's completely tax-free income and no work. So it's tough. It's tough to know the people who are working the system versus the people who genuinely need the help. And there's a lot of that in Phoenix. I don't know about other places. It's huge in Phoenix. It's very, very profitable. And the age range could be what look like kids out there to what look like retired folks. Some claiming to be veterans. Whether they are or not, I don't know. So, in Phoenix, you got to do what you got to do, and it's definitely one of the reasons why I want to get out of the town. Is the attitude of the culture is very selfish. It's not, and you can't live in that for 30 years without becoming that way yourself, unfortunately. So I do see it in myself at times, and I get upset, and I'm upset at myself for mimicking what I'm seeing or having it impact me in that way. Ben Fitzpatrick has contributed $2. Thanks for the amazing videos, Carrie. Keep it up. Thank you, Ben. I think there was another one that came up earlier I missed. Yeah. CDay599 contributed $5. Thank you for that. Planner Jockey wants to know if there's any new repair videos in the pipeline. No, at this point there is not. However, remember, I work as a working technician and customers can call at any time. Nothing's to stop my phone from ringing other than I've silenced it. You guys may not be aware of that, but I generally silence this so that I don't get interrupted, and any phone calls will go to voicemail and I'll deal with them after I get off the air. I wasn't doing that before, but it's getting very, very hard to balance without interruption, and so I found this to be better, and the customers, it's very reasonable for a customer to wait an hour or two for a callback. That's a normal SLA. Anything under 4 hours is a good SLA. You may see me kind of glance at it from time to time just because there are 2 customers of mine that if they call and it's an emergency, I may have to immediately stop the broadcast. It's very rare that that would ever happen. Prepper Patriot says, come to Dallas, Carrie. I've already been to Dallas. Been there, done that. Nice place. I'd like to go to Gas Monkey Garage, maybe go to the Gas Monkey Grill. I was at the Hyatt Regency in Dallas for the gaming competition. When I was doing the radio show, they sent me out there to cover that. I had never been to Dallas before. I was surprised how far away the airport was. Usually an airport, in my experience, is about 20 minutes away from the suburbs, and not in Dallas. It's a good 45 minutes. I mean, the taxi ride was like $50 or $60. I was like, really? It was all paid for by the radio show, but I realized that Dallas and Fort Worth are often listed together, and that airport covers both. And I don't know how far away Fort Worth is. I worked for Radio Shack, so I heard about Fort Worth all the time because that's where Tandy was, they're headquartered out of. But yeah, and I walked downtown at night at Dallas, and I didn't feel threatened at all. It was kind of empty. A lot of good, what looked like good barbecue places there. So, not that I wouldn't mind going back. I definitely like Dallas better than Houston. Houston I did not like at all. Have you tried Uber? Well, Uber didn't exist up until a couple of years ago, so I haven't been anywhere where I would need an Uber. So I haven't needed Uber or Lyft ever yet. So I don't even have the Uber app. But, if I'm ever sent somewhere again, Uber would certainly be an option. The hotel actually offered a free shuttle back and forth to the airport. I just didn't know that at the time it had to be scheduled in advance. So the ride back to the airport I scheduled at my check-in because I asked the hotel about it and they said, okay, and we'll schedule you. And so it was a free shuttle ride back. But again, I wasn't paying for it. It was all being taken care of by the company. Have I ever been to Austin? No, I've not been to Austin. I've been to Amarillo, because it's right off the 40, and when I do my road trips, that's one of the, if I'm going east, generally you're going to get on the 40 and take the Interstate 40 across to wherever you're going east, heading east in the United States. So I've been through Amarillo many, many times, and Douglas is saying Uber and Lyft are pretty crappy to their drivers. Well, you know, nobody makes you drive for them. If you don't like it, quit. I have no sympathy for anybody who claims they're not being treated well by their employer. When I wasn't treated well by my employer, I addressed it with the employer and gave the employer an opportunity to correct it. When the employer did not do so, I quit, in many cases without notice, because I owed that employer nothing. If that's how they're going to treat me, then that's how I treat them back. Remember, I'm from Michigan. We treat people the way we are treated by them. People are nice to us, we're nice back. When people are mean, we're mean back. It's just how I was raised. So I was a jerk employee, or I became one, when it became apparent that the employer just didn't care. So then I didn't care. And anybody who works at a job that they think they're not being treated fairly for needs to find some other work. It's the best thing I can tell you. Would you ever go to Greece for vacation? Oh, I would love to go to Greece. Absolutely. Where would you like to live? It's hard to tell you where I'd like to live if I've never been there, but I will say I'm very attracted to England. I don't know why. Specifically the Cotswolds. I could be totally happy there, living in a thatched roof home with many acres of land, with a small village nearby. As long as I had high-speed internet access, I can be doing this from anywhere in the world, you know. So I'm lucky in that I can do this job from anywhere, but I would need to have that internet access. And, you know, I really miss Michigan, and I think sooner or later I will end up back there. Carrie, have you been to South Carolina? I have been to South Carolina, just briefly. I was actually on my way to North Carolina and had to drive through it. Are you going to try video editing on this Threadripper build? That'll be the goal after the build's been completed, after all the names have been put on it, after the panels, and it's all said and done. I'll contact Cyberlink to see if they'll give me another license so I can run the tests. This may very well become the new video editor, although I have to say, the Ryzen 7 1700 is functioning flawlessly as an editor. I'm very impressed with it. So it's not like I feel as though the new Ryzen 7 is lacking in any way. I just wonder, would this be better? And if so, will it be noticeably better? And the only way to know is to try it. David says, I would like Devon in the UK. Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of places I'd like in the UK. I'd probably like Blackpool. I'd probably like I would love Wales, for sure. I would love to visit Ireland and Scotland. Liverpool has a lot of historic places to see. Essex. I mean, the only places I don't want to be are in the really crowded places. I would go to London for a day and get it out, you know, just see all the sights, see Windsor Castle and Trafalgar Square and do all that. But then I want to go get away from everybody. Keith says, I don't see this current fascination with having a PC light up like a Christmas tree. I agree with you, Keith. I'm on board. I'm on board. It doesn't make any sense to me. Mosinelli says, watching your video is always better than watching TVs or movies. Thank you for the knowledge that you give. Love you, sir. Well, thank you, Mosen. It's very kind of you. Is your wife from Michigan? No, no. The only time she'd been to Michigan is when I'd taken her there. I'll be going back to Michigan later this month, and I'm going to show her the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And we'll go to Traverse City and Mackinac Island and Lilano Peninsula. If time allows, we'll go to Munising. If you Google Munising and just hit the images button, it's just beautiful. And it's a part of Michigan that I didn't spend much time in when I was a kid. I've never been to Munising, but Traverse City and Mackinac Island, I've been there over a dozen times in my life, and it's always a pleasant place. The people are always nice. The food in Michigan is so good. But again, I was raised on it, right? So that's sort of planted the seed, if you will, of what I consider to be the baseline to compare everything else to. And so every time I go back to Michigan, the food is always good. I've never had a bad meal in Michigan on my trips. Do you honor Nikola Tesla? You know, Nikola Tesla and Alan Turing, I think, are two people who unfortunately died never knowing how much they were later celebrated and so much deserved. You know, there's a story there of people who have done all the right things and for political reasons, or people who had control politically. You know, Nikola Tesla died broke, and Alan Turing, I mean, he basically created digital thinking. Before him, everybody thought analog. This man had to explain ones and zeros, on and off. It was a whole new concept that had never before been even conceived of or thought of or imagined. And he did that to crack the Enigma encoding from the Germans, and they didn't want the public to know about it, so it had to be kept quiet. And he was also a gay man, and at that time, that was punishable by law. So he would be imprisoned, even though he basically saved the country. They couldn't say that. And he was imprisoned for being a homosexual. It was just wrong. It's wrong on so many counts. And long after he dies, I think just a couple of years ago, the Queen of England made him an honorary either OBE or knighthood. I don't know which one it is. OBE is not quite the level of knighthood. But still, he's dead. You know, what good is that now? So yes, Nikola Tesla and Alan Turing, it's just too bad they weren't alive to receive the accolades and recognition for their accomplishments. Now, if you're into computers and you wonder where all this started, watch the movie The Imitation Game, which is Benedict Cumberbatch, and he plays Alan Turing. And the story is a little bit exaggerated. It's a little more dramatic than the real thing, but enough of it's there, though. It's, you know, 75% of it's going to be dead on accurate. And if you are fascinated with computers, if you enjoy playing your computer games, or you enjoy getting on the internet and watching YouTube videos, this is the man who created this whole thought process. And I think you owe it to yourself to understand who he was and how amazing he was for this toy that you've got to play with now, with the knowledge of human beings being available at your fingertips. It's just a mouse click away from knowing anything you want to know. And of course, Alan Turing couldn't have possibly imagined that final outcome, or, well, we don't even know the final outcome, but couldn't have imagined that level of growth and opportunity that this technology would lead to. But it's the catalyst of what started it. Gunnar Sandberg mentions a documentary called The King of Kong. It's kind of a sad documentary, and what it's about is guys that were teenagers in the 80s, like myself, that hung out at the arcades, and they got really, really good at video games to the point where they would enter in competitions. And back then, there weren't many people that were competitive at the arcade game, and so you'd have to fly to, I don't know if it was Minnesota or where it was, but where they had the competition, and play against people you'd never seen, never heard of before, because there was no internet. So you really didn't know, you know, just because you were good in your town didn't mean you were good across the United States. And the reason I say that the documentary is sad is there's a couple of people that they interview that's all they have in their life. They're in their 40s, they're out of shape, and all they can talk about is how great they used to be in the 1980s. Nothing about how great they are today. This is what I did. It's like the guy, I think of Al Bundy from Married with Children, and he always talks about how great his football days were in high school, and he wants to tell everybody about it. And they're sick of hearing his story. He's not talking about his life today. And I get so sad when I see the documentary of these guys that they're just holding on to that accomplishment from 1986 with both hands and not letting it go. And that's all they have. It's all they have. I just find that incredibly sad. It's an interesting documentary nonetheless. Rusty Shackelford. Al Bundy, who scored 4 touchdowns in 1 game at Polk High. That's a good memory, Rusty. Carrie, have you seen Brainstorm with a young Christopher Walken? No, if you want to see a young Christopher Walken and a young John Lithgow and a young, go see The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. That's a stupid movie. I think a young Jeff Goldblum is in there too. Bartek Kasitorny? Bartek. I'm trying to read somebody's name. Bartek Kasitorny. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but hello, Bartek. I'll just call you Bartek. I have to say, I keep seeing more and more previews for the upcoming Solo Star Wars movie. And this looks amazing. Every time I see a new scene, my jaw drops. When Han Solo meets Chewbacca, and Chewbacca's like, "Arr," and he goes, "Well, I'm not calling you that. We're gonna have to come up with a different name. I'm not calling you that." That's what we're gonna do, Bartek. I'm just gonna call you Chewie. What I like about this upcoming Solo movie is there's no John Williams orchestral music. It's like rock and roll type music. The Star Wars universe looks like a different side of it we haven't seen, and he's just a bad boy. He's just like, you know, the Empire has taken over his planet, and he's sort of working on the fringes against the Empire, and if he gets caught, he'll probably be put to death by the Empire. And he's kind of this risk taker, almost very Indiana Jones in space from the looks of it. It looks like there's a lot of humor in it, which is always a good thing. Indiana Jones always had that good humor in there to keep the story moving, and when it got a little too serious. And the special effects, of course, they look amazing. So I'm either setting myself up to be very disappointed, or it may prove to be one of the few Star Wars movies that I want to go back and see again and again and again. Like I saw Return to The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens. I saw The Force Awakens twice because I took my nephew to go see it. The Last Jedi, I've watched it once. That's enough. You know, it's good, I like it, but I don't like it enough to watch it again and again and again. It's very rare that a movie does that for me, but I will say I was watching The Fifth Element last night, and I love the details in the movie. I love the humor in it. I love, there's stuff I picked up in the movie that I didn't notice before. When Bruce Willis is on the phone, he says, "No, I'm not flying a fighter anymore." So he used to be a fighter pilot. I didn't get that the first 27 times I've seen the movie. It was only recently, and I was just jumping around to my favorite parts. You know, when the diva sings, it's so well thought out with the way it's filmed and the way that the music takes classic opera and then mixes it into pop music. And it's so creative and so original, and it really holds up well even today. Aziz, more light, Aziz. That's Luke Perry. That's in the beginning of the movie. There's parts of the movie I think could have been better. The way that Mila Jovovich, the way that she plays that part is so believable. When you watch Star Trek and a Klingon goes, there's no sense that they're really saying anything. But when Lilu talks in The Fifth Element, she sounds like she's really telling you something. There's emotion, and certain words come out with emotion. And it really feels like she's speaking a real language. And I've never experienced that in any sci-fi movie before. Nobody's been able to pull that off the way she did. So those are the kind of things, I like those little details. It sort of absorbs me into the story. And, you know, it is, when you look at the shot of all the cars and the traffic going through the city, if you look at the details of the buildings on the balconies, there are people walking around the balconies as far back as your eyes can see. In most CGI shots, things are missing, birds and mosquitoes and wind. It's not right. Fifth Element got it right all those years ago. And it's something that you don't see in the Star Wars universe. You really don't deal with mosquitoes. The big joke is, of course, there's never a bathroom. Nobody uses a bathroom. It's interesting to me when a director goes through the process of putting in the details. And so directors who do that are James Cameron, Guillermo del Toro is very much into the details. In Avatar, when the guy gets into the bodysuit and he turns the engine on, the engine's behind him in the big robotic suit, and you can see waves of heat coming off the engine behind him when he turns it on. I eat that stuff up. I'm like, oh, that's. There's so much sci-fi when they activate things, there doesn't seem to be any sort of effect in the atmosphere or in their surroundings, and it just feels fake. I don't know any other way to put it. So when directors go through the process of adding these little details, that's where I get absorbed and really drawn into the story. Spectre says, The Martian is my favorite movie. I was very disappointed by The Martian only because the book was so good. But I think it's true of any book. Anytime you read a book and then go see the movie, you're always going to say the book is better. But there's a good third of that movie missing, and really doesn't really convey the real struggle that the book does. So if you've ever read the book The Martian, I think if you think the movie's great, just wait till you read the book. It's amazing. One of the best books I have seen or read in a long, long time. Ron Stewart says, hey, Uncle Kerry. Hi, Ron. Have you watched Creed? No, I know I did like the Sylvester Stallone, the Rocky movies, but I haven't watched Creed. It's on my to-watch list. But Sylvester Stallone just announced that he's going to start production of the next Rambo movie, which should be the final one. I think Sylvester's 70 years old now. I'll take it. I'm always happy to see a Chuck Norris or Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger, because remember, these were the action movies. Before there was Call of Duty to play, you watched Rambo, you watched Invasion USA, or Missing in Action, or Commando, Predator, Terminator. These were the movies that were our Call of Duty. They were our Battlefield. They were that was the closest you got to it, because all the arcade games were all 2D, straight level action. There wasn't any POV, no point of view FPS stuff. Have I seen K-Pax? Yes, with Kevin Spacey. That was an interesting movie. Not my favorite. It was interesting, though. Do I remember Space 1999? Yes. Shows like Space 1999 and UFO that were out in that time, I didn't like them because everything was shiny and new and clean and always worked. One of the things that attracted me to Star Wars in 1977 was one of the very first science fiction films where things looked lived in and abused and scratched and dented, and sometimes when you turned them on, they didn't work. One of my favorite scenes is when he's like, don't worry, I'm going to get us out of here. We're going to hit hyperspace, hit it, Chewie. And the engines ramp up, and it goes, and it just doesn't work. And Han gets up and he smacks the console, and all the, like the Fonz would smack the jukebox on Happy Days. Han Solo smacks the console and all the lights come back on and then they go off. That is much more believable to me. So every time I watch Base 1999 or UFO and you notice all the sets look perfect and pretty, it reminds me of how disconnected the people who finance the films are, and to some extent still are. Samuel Goldwyn of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM, was quoted once by going to a set, and the set was supposed to be a back alley, a dirty, nasty back alley for this film. And he goes, "Why does this set look so terrible?" And the director explained to him that this is supposed to be a dirty back alley. And Samuel Goldwyn, the money man, says, "This set cost me $1 million, so it should be the best back alley anybody has ever seen on film." What? And this is a big problem you have in Hollywood. So even this recent Solo movie that's coming up for Star Wars, there were 2 directors, I think they're brothers if I'm not mistaken, and there's something called dailies. And what a daily is, for those of you not in the industry, you take what you filmed for the day and you give it to the bosses, the money people, and they look at what you shot and they tell you, this is good, change this, fix that, and they give it back to you with feedback. And then your job as the director is to do what they tell you to do. You don't necessarily get to make the movie you want to make. You're making the movie the people with the money pay you to make. It's like if you're a painter and Campbell's Soup hires you to paint their paint, you know, like that famous tomato soup can by, what's his name? I can't think of his name. Famous painter. You don't get the discretion of painting whatever you want. You're paid to do it. So these directors kept giving their dailies back, and the dailies were as if they weren't listening at all to what they were being told to do. Like they were still doing their own thing. So they fired them. People are saying it was Andy Warhol. It wasn't. I know Andy Warhol did that, but there was another guy, Rock. What's his name? Rock. He always made the real family night, really family, like Coca-Cola. What's his name? Rockefeller? No, was that Rockefeller? Can't think of his name. No, Rock Hudson was an actor. He wasn't a painter. Famous painter. Come on, you guys have to know who I'm talking about. Was it Rockwell? It doesn't sound right, Rockwell. You know what? You're going to make me Google it, aren't you? All right, let's see. Yeah, Norman Rockwell. That's who I want. Yeah, Norman Rockwell. Thank you. Thank you for your help. Okay, so I have completely forgotten what I was talking about now. Oh, so the 2 directors were just basically ignoring all the feedback on their daily shoots that the bosses were giving them. And the bosses said, "You're fired. We're done. We've told you what to fix. You're still doing exactly the same thing you were doing. You're fired." Then they had Ron Howard come in and direct. So Ron Howard had to take a look at what was filmed already to determine if he could use any of it. So he had to clean up the mess. So the movie that's coming out was started by 2 directors, ended up being finished by Ron Howard. And it's clear to me Ron Howard's a company man, right? Ron Howard says, "I'll direct whatever you tell me to direct, whenever you want." There's a part of me that just doesn't respect that. But I also admit I really like his films. So that's my dilemma on seeing Solo, because the trailers, and let's face it, the trailers always make stuff look good, right? I mean, if it looks bad in the trailer, it's probably not going to be better. So, but so far it looks really, really good. The computer got really quiet. Fans are spinning and it's really, really quiet. So I think it might have gone to sleep. Does this mean the build is complete? Yeah, I think the build is complete. We can try and do a little overclock on it. I'm sure it'll handle it with those cool temps. The GIGABYTE software, let me pull up the GIGABYTE software. Let's take a look at that. Let's go to the PC. Hold on, there it is. Okay. So what I can do, if I go down here, I've got this GIGABYTE software installed, which is the App Center. And in the App Center, there's RGB Fusion and EasyTune. So RGB Fusion is what allows us to control the RGB lighting. And the areas in red are showing us which lights we're controlling. And we can save several different profiles. So here we can do like a pulse. And let me flip over here so you can see. Gosh darn it, I keep pulling Rob. Oh, I have to turn the camera back on. There we go. You should have video here in just a second. Okay, so here is, let me turn the lights out, make it a little darker. You can see these lights. This is one of the rare occasions where less light is better. So here we're all blue, which is kind of cool because you'll see the case lights are blue. The SAPPHIRE logo on the graphics card is also blue. And I can't change that as far as I know, but I haven't really checked. But I might just keep it all blue. I don't think I want it to pulse. I'd almost rather it's static so it's not a distraction. So let's go, let me see if I can do this. I should be able to have picture-in-picture. Let's try and see what it'll do. Can we minimize that? No, I don't want that view. Let's do this view. And PC capture. We put PC capture above it. And then I should be able to not minimize it, but shrink it down a bit. Is that going to let me do it? So I still have to learn this OBS software a little better because it's not allowing me. I know there's a way. I know there's a way. I should be able to shrink this down and bring up. There. Okay. So now you can see when I click on this, except it's so small I can't read it. You guys can probably see it better than I can. I think that's, what does that say? Media, so I think it's going to blink and move to any sound. And then there's whatever this option is. But I love how it's controlling the color of not only the sockets that the memory sits in, but the memory itself. That was very unexpected. And you can see the way the colors are cycling and rotating around the entire board, top to bottom. And then let's see, let's go to this one. Go to this one. That's kind of cool. That's a little seizure-inducing. This one's grayed out. I can't select it. Let's try this one. Just a great way to waste your time. Just sit there and play with this for days and days and days. So I'm going to leave it on that for right now. And how do I control those case lights? I'm going to have to go back to full screen on this one. There we go. Now I can read it again. So here we can adjust brightness and speed. We can select different colors from the color wheel, different profiles, and then there are different options up here at the top. If you want to control perhaps having the colors change based on CPU temperature or based on CPU usage, so the lights actually can serve a purpose. You can schedule the lights to come on or go off, so you don't have to do it manually every time. You can have your lights show your land speed based on, I mean, that seems kind of stupid because it's not like your land speed's ever going to change. And then of course your system temperatures can be monitored, where it's green if it's below 30, yellow if it's between 30 and 60, and then orange if it goes above 61 centigrade. So there can be some use for it. And here, if you want to turn the lights off altogether, you just hit that button right up there, and now all the lights on the board, if we switch over here, now all the lights are completely off, except of course the case lights and the graphics card light. So I'm not quite sure. We're going to probably have to download some software from NZXT, I'm guessing, to control those case lights. I was hoping that that the GIGABYTE Fusion software would see it automatically, which maybe it will, and I just haven't configured it right. There's a little gear up here. If you want the LEDs in sleep, hibernate, I always want those off, which is fine. That's all it offers me there. Under advanced, it's got the name of the board. You can export your settings, so if you ever have to reformat and reinstall, you don't have to reset all that up by hand again. So the only other thing I'm wondering is if, let's close that out. I'm wondering if maybe I have to install a driver. Let's go to EasyTune. So EasyTune allows you to overclock the system. Now, I don't care if people overclock, I just don't want them calling me because they've created a problem by voluntarily overclocking. So if you want to overclock, then you deal with the end results of that. Don't contact me for support because you push the system beyond its engineering limit. But if you want to do that and solve your own problems, then yeah, by all means, go right ahead. So we've got different modes. This is there's like an eco mode. There's the default for your fans, I guess. This is what, what this is. These little lines are supposed to be air, I guess, moving, and then overclock. And then there's auto tuning. Let's see what that brings up. Let's do start. Now, this should cause the system to crash when it pushes it too far. And so let's watch how this process works. It's pretty interesting. When you see the no signal on the screen, that means that's the video capture card saying I don't have a signal being fed into me right now. That's because the system is rebooting, and as soon as the system sends the signal to the capture card, then the capture card displays it to you. And again, I can't say thanks enough to viewer Colin Hilton, who's provided the capture card to me. This is a high-dollar capture card, and it's enabling me to do some really cool things now with multiple cameras and video captures, is what you've been witnessing, all thanks to the generosity of one viewer. So, I mean, that's just incredible. And you can bet if Cullen ever has a question for me or a technical support question, I will be right there to answer it for him. The least I can do. Okay, so we're auto-tuning right now, and here we are with Easy Tune. And let's see what this does. The GPU light can be controlled by software called SAPPHIRE Tricks, downloaded through the SAPPHIRE website. Well, thank you for that. I'll have to do that. Although I do like that blue. The idea is that you would have all your RGB lights on the Aura or Aurora, whatever they're calling it, depending on who the manufacturer is, into an industry standard, so that you would have one piece of software. Here we go. Let's see what it's going to do here. So it's showing it at 100 times 34. You can hear the fans are starting to crank up. And it's going to stress test the CPU. Just because the CPU will run at a higher megahertz, at a higher frequency, doesn't mean it'll run stable when it's pushed hard. So what auto-tuning does is it takes the manual process that's typically involved with overclocking of making adjustments in the BIOS, and testing it, and then if it passes all the tests, you go to the next highest level, and you keep doing that until the system crashes, and you go, okay, I was fine right up until where I crashed, so I'll take it back to the previous one. It's going to do that for you automatically here. So you just push a button, and you don't have to have the overclocking skills that were required years ago, which makes overclocking a lot easier for folks who want to do it, but don't quite understand what all the little voltage settings can be, should be, or megahertz, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now it's cranked it to 34.5, and and that's what it's gonna do until it crashes. So what the software does is every time it passes the stress test, it leaves a little, for lack of a better explanation, it leaves a little checkbox, right? So when it crashes and it reboots, it goes, what was the last box I checked? Because that was the highest frequency that we could run the CPU at where it passed the stress test. It's pretty simple how it works. Oh, Colin Hilton is in the chat. I didn't even realize that. Well, good. Well, he got to hear his well-deserved recognition. And it's not even so much that, you know, well, that Colin's financial contribution is appreciated. The fact that he continues to participate in the chat room, I mean, that means the world to me. You know, it's why I'm here. Bill Sonit says, hello, Carrie. Hi, Bill. Ian Scott Johnston says, born in 1965. Yeah, I was born in 68. So Colin said he's 74. So you guys are making me feel young. Thank you for that. Video cards should be relatively all available again at MSRP, by the way. If you go to EVGA's website, they're limiting a purchase of 2 to each buyer, but every card, as far as I can tell, is available at MSRP. The problem wasn't just the Bitcoiners, the problem was also the RAM, the HBM and the GDDR RAM that they're using on these graphics cards is very, very expensive. And when you combine that RAM shortage along with the Bitcoin, not the Bitcoin, but the cryptocurrency miners, it was sort of this perfect storm of creating all of these GPU shortages. So that should all be behind us now, I hope. And I suspect prices may start to go below MSRP. I think they're squeezing out. They're right at the cusp of being between what was a shortage. And I think if that continues within the next 2 months, I hope prices will be below MSRP. And then NVIDIA has the 2070 and the 2080 due out in the fall, I believe. So instead of the 1070, the 1080, you'll have the 2070 to 2080. You really hear those fans cranking up as we're pushing this overclock right now. It's definitely letting you know it's working. Let's see if we can get a picture-in-picture working on here. I don't need this to be full screen, do I? Let's see. Where can I put it? It's covering up something no matter where I put it. Maybe I can just move the camera. How about that? How about that? Other way. See, stuff like this, I couldn't have done this before. I mean, I could have done it, but it would have been kind of choppy because it's all feeding in through the USB, or it used to be, and I would start oversaturating the USB ports with too much data. And let's see if I can do this one too. We can put me right over here. Look at that. We got 3 of the 4 inputs running right now. Except I don't want to look at my oven. Pretty cool, pretty cool. Look at me, all high tech. Brian Henry says hello from North Carolina. Hi Brian, welcome into the channel. Diego Dan says it needs a fan controller. Fan controllers are great if this was 1997, but this is all controlled by the motherboard in an intelligent level where the fans will crank up as necessary. The computer is working very, very hard right now, and if you were to silence those fans, you would quickly overheat. So you have to make a decision. Do you want to run cool or do you want to run quiet? And when we're working really, really hard, there's going to be some noise generated with that. It's a big, big chip. It's got 32 threads. That's 16 cores with 32 threads. And it's working as hard as it can possibly work right now. In fact, it's working harder than it was engineered to run. Because right now we are overclocking or pushing the boundaries, pushing the limit of what it was intended to run out of the box. And as a result, it's going to run hotter than it was engineered to run, it's going to run faster than it was engineered to run, and it will eventually, once we push it so far, it will crash. What we're looking for is that crash point. That crash is going to indicate to us what the safest speed to run at is, and even then it's not going to be exact because their stress test that GIGABYTE is running on their utility may not be good enough for doing things like video editing, which could stress it and tax it in ways that actually cause it to crash. That's why I'm not a fan of overclocking, because it starts to interfere with productivity. But that being said, I'm very curious as to what the automated number is on the frequency. So Irvin in the chat room says he thinks it's going to crash somewhere between 4 and 4.1 gigahertz. The single 8-pin on the CPU could potentially limit your overclock. That's possible, but it doesn't seem to be limiting it yet. Everything looks pretty good from what I'm seeing. In fact, the screen is a bit too small. Let's see if we can, let's Let me temporarily make this full screen so I can see it. So right now we're at 3800. Oh, it seems to have stopped at 3800. It doesn't want to take us any higher than that. So yeah, it may be possible by adding another power connector. I don't think it'll hurt anything. I just don't think it's needed. It's certainly not needed if you're not overclocking. There's a 4-pin connector just above the 8-pin connector. And usually on most motherboards you have one or the other. It's pretty rare you have both. And I can tell it's done because it's quieted back down again. You don't hear the fans running like it was. So I'm surprised I never saw it crash. It's showing 3.8, which isn't a huge overclock at all. So it's probably going to be okay at that speed. Let me go full screen here again. Boy, they really need a hotkey for this. Okay, so auto tuning, save to profile, I guess. Let's just hit exit. So what I was going to show you here on the app, actually I'm going to have to go full screen on my side. It looks the same to you guys. I'm talking to myself. Let's bring up the app center. Now there's a lot of other apps you can put in here. There's a BIOS updater and stuff. I've just put on the RGB Fusion and Easy Tune. And Easy Tune has a setting that's already identified an overclock that should work with all Threadrippers, which is under, well, it would just be, I think it's just easy mode. This is all old school if you want to do it by hand. This would be your memory frequency. Remember, we've got the XMP setup profile running on this now. But if you wanted to push it beyond that, you could certainly try. Then there are advanced power settings here involving voltages. And this is where you can get yourself in a lot of trouble and damage things if you don't know what you're doing. But it could be critical to hit those really high clock speeds to massage those. You could save different profiles. And then there's something called, oh, this is Smart Boost. This controls the, keeping the CPU running quietly and bringing the megahertz of the CPU down so it's not consuming as much power, which costs less to run. It's more eco-friendly. And then of course eco mode itself, which is disabled for some reason. It's not offering that. And what are these buttons down here for? It's giving us a little information there. I don't know what that does. So our CPU ratio was 38, and the stock ratio was, what? I forgot. So if I wanted to change that, if I wanted to try and get to 4 gigahertz, instead of trusting the software, I go, give me 4 gigahertz, and then apply that. We'll see if we crash it. And probably one of the best tests would be just run Prime 95 on here and work that CPU at 4 gigahertz. These are all each thread. It's just the window's not big enough to show you, but these are the workers happening on each thread. So there's 32 of those in the list running at 100%. And we should be able to pull up something to monitor the CPU frequency. Let's try, do I have CPU Z on here? I don't see it. Well, it's telling us down here, isn't it? Certainly didn't seem to give me that overclock at all. But remember, the way that it overclocks, each core, and there's 16 cores, each core can overclock to a different level. So when I set this to 40, I have no idea if any of those cores are going to hit 40 or not. Let's see. Let's go to the resource monitor. Oh, it just locked up on me. And that's what you get when you overclock. That's exactly it right there. So, you know, is it worth to go a little bit faster to potentially have your system lock up in the middle of doing some work? I guess it depends what kind of work you do. For me, it would be kind of embarrassing to have my stream interrupted over a computer that's overclocking when the overclock doesn't make my stream any better. So I'm going to just go ahead and shut the machine off. I'll just hold the power button in until the machine shuts off. And then I'm going to turn it right back on again. We can go back to the main camera here. And we should be able to just go back into the software. Since Windows loads okay, it seems like it's so in the old days when you overclocked a CPU, it always ran at that speed 24/7. Now CPUs can ramp up and ramp down, and what you're doing when you overclock is you're saying, okay, when you ramp up, I want you to ramp up higher than you normally do. That way, when you're just browsing the web or you're stepped away from the computer, it's not just constantly pushing that CPU like they used to, which would also cost you an arm and a leg in electricity. So it's much more intelligent now, and I'm sure it's only going to get better as time goes on. But let's go ahead and bring that let me bring that utility up. I can't see the bottom corner of the screen until I shut that camera off. So let's go down to the GIGABYTE utility again. Got to use the proper mouse to do it. There we go. And let's go to Easy Tune. Now I could just leave it on auto settings, although I don't know why I would want to be honest. We want to go to auto tuning here. So this function called Easy Tune, this is what I wanted to show you. Easy Tune has an overclock profile already set up at 3. You guys can probably see that better than me. It's either 3.6 or 3.8. I think it's 3.6 from 3.4. And they're basically saying every Threadripper of this model should be able to do 3.6 out of the box without any testing. That's what that is. So that's your default overclock. That should be safe. So let's apply that one. I think just by clicking on it, I applied it. So it's saying right down here, CPU speed still at 3.4, even though I've told it to go to 3.6. And that 3.6 is going to vary depending on what it says there, depending on your system configuration. They've got it all sort of mapped out from testing. And then let's bring up Prime 95 again. Again, this is pushing the CPU very, very hard. I still don't see it breaking 3.4, even though it says 3.6 here. You guys are recommending I run hardware monitor instead, or HW monitor? Sure, let's try that. Maybe that'll give us more information. Let me minimize this. Here's all of our clock speed. Oh yeah, it's hitting 3693. Yeah. So you can see the cores, when we come down here and we look at core 0, that's the one that's reading here on this software. We're only seeing core 0 for some reason. But when we look here on the list, we can see what our current value is on this first row, what our minimum value has been on this middle row, and what our maximum value has been on this far row. And it does look like all the cores have hit 3593 at some point, but it's not doing it. Oh yeah, there it is. It's hitting 3593 on core 0, but over here it still says 3396 for some reason. Well, that's a puzzle, isn't it? You'd think GIGABYTE software would be more accurate than third-party open source software, but I don't know what to say about that. But I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to put it back to default. We should see these speeds drop back down when I do that, right? Let's go back over to overclock. We should see the speeds move back up. 3593. Watch this number right here. Go back to default. Not a big difference. That overclock's very, very mild. I think I will leave it on because it's so mild, I don't think it'll be a problem. It's also so mild, I don't think I'll notice the difference one way or the other. So, there you have it. Welcome to overclocking. And let's stop prime 95 so these fans will quiet down. Go to test, go to stop, click OK. And then test and exit. There we go. All right. And then I can go back to full screen over here. All right, there. Everything's looking good. I think at this point it's safe for me to start doing the cable management, getting that wrapped up and figured out. Do I want to put that other connector on the CPU? I suppose I could. I really want to do a little research on that. I'm going to Google it a little bit later and figure out if there's any negative side to hooking up that additional 4-pin CPU power. If there's no negative to it, I mean, I've got the cables. Why not? It's a big enough case. It's not going to crowd it or anything. Carrie, did you go back and change from 4 gigahertz? The system froze at 4 gigahertz, and when I restarted it, it went back to 3.6 or 3.4 automatically. I thought I was going to have to go in and change it, but it did it on its own. Brian says he's had customers that he's built PCs for that overclocked it themselves, and then after he told them not to or advised them against it, they did it anyway, then called him asking him to fix their computer, and he said no. Well, I wouldn't say no, but I'd say it's not warranty, it's not free. I'll be happy to fix your computer, but let's differentiate what's a warranty repair versus what's a self-inflicted damage, right? So, you know, I had one customer that got themselves virus infected on a brand new computer, and I cleaned it for free and explained that this has nothing to do with me. This was a bad decision you or somebody who used the computer made. I'll take care of it for you this one time, but if it happens again, I'm going to have to charge you. Then it happened again, and when I said, okay, I'm going to charge you, they were okay with it. I took the virus off, but when it came time to pay, they didn't think they should have to. See, now that I did the work, and I said, I said, I'm not liable for this. You know, if you bought a car from me and you crashed that car into a telephone pole, you don't get to return the car or expect me to fix it for free just because you made a bad decision behind the wheel. That's nothing to do with me or the quality of the car. And they said, well, how am I supposed to not get viruses? And I said, well, you have to educate yourself. Well, how do I do that? Take a college class. You know, it's not expensive to join take a class at your local community college. They all offer them. Well, aren't there books I can read? Well, there's the 4 Dummies series of books, but they're going to be very limited in how useful they're going to be. I really think you're better off where you can ask questions. You can't ask a book questions, but if you take a class, you'll be able to ask your instructor things. And they said, well, isn't that what antivirus is supposed to do? And it's like, no. Antivirus is just there to help you. It can't protect you 100%. Nothing can, other than just making smarter decisions with behind the keyboard and, you know, using your keyboard and mouse. And they said, well, there's got to be something else. I said, there is. It's called an Apple. You go buy yourself an Apple, and you don't have to worry about this stuff. And they looked at me as if I just told them to go bugger themselves. They were very offended. And I never heard from that client ever again. And I don't care. But it was true. It's very true. What I said wasn't nasty. What I said was honest. But Apple is so much money that to them it was an insult. Keith W. says, what annoys me are clients that want you to drop everything and fix their issue quickly, but then they drag their heels when it's time to pay the bill. This is an ongoing issue with people that are self-employed in every industry. And with computers, I can tell you what happens. Mike Smith and I had a discussion where he had a client that was a nonprofit, I think it was a church, and they claimed money was tight and they weren't able to pay him. And because it's a nonprofit, because he's a church and Mike's a religious guy, he was going along with it. And I go, Mike, do you think they call the power company up and say, sorry, we didn't pay the electric bill, times are tight? I guarantee you the power bill got paid. And what about the water? I bet you that bill got paid. Why didn't your bill get paid? Your bill didn't get paid because they can get away with it. I said, you think these people that work at the church aren't getting paid? Do you think their salaries are being cut? That they're not, I'm sorry, I'm not paying you this week? They're getting paid. They're getting their salaries. So don't you feel sorry for them? And I said, if you're not careful, if the money situation's that bad, then they'll soon be out of business. And if you continue to allow them to accrue debt with you, then you'll be following them right out of business if you don't put your foot down. And he didn't want to be a bad guy, and he, you know, like, and I said, you know, this isn't about being a good guy or bad guy, it's just business. They're treating you differently because they can. They wouldn't treat the power company this way because their power would be shut off. And then they wouldn't have a business. Just like if their computers weren't working. So he took it to heart, and he ended up kind of meeting in the middle with them, letting them make payments. And even that didn't occur until they called him and needed him again. And my advice to him was, you tell him I'm more than happy to help you, just have a check for the amount due waiting for me when I get there. Well, we don't have it. Well, you better have something, which is exactly what ended up happening. He said, okay, we can give you $100 or something a week. He's like, great, that's something. And then he went back and continued to add to their debt, which I don't necessarily agree with, but he saw it as a goodwill gesture of the community, and he could always take it as a tax deduction. But what I explained to him is tax deductions to charitable organizations should be a decision that you make, not a decision that they make. So it was a good learning experience, I think, for Mike. It's an uncomfortable position to be placed in, but your client's the one who puts you there. I will tell you, when I went to see the Avengers movie, I got to the movie theater an hour early. I waited in line behind a bunch of other people. A half an hour later, they opened the line and let us into the theater. And I'm not at the end of the line, but I should be able to get a good seat. That's why I went an hour early, is because my seat is very important to me. I want to find a good seat. And as people are moving into the theater, I'm seeing all the center seats are taken all the way up the rows, except for one row. And I've seen people ahead of me trying to sit there and they get shooed away. So I go to sit there, and the guy says, this guy sits 5 seats down. He goes, I'm saving these 5 seats. I go, dude, you can't save 5 seats. You can save 2. You can't save 5. He says, oh, you're going to be one of those guys? Am I going to be a guy that follows the rules? That has consideration for other people that waited in line for an hour? Not to hold seats for people who haven't even bought tickets yet? Yeah, I guess I'm going to be one of those. He goes, fine, where do you want to sit? I said, I want to sit right here in the middle. Oh, great. And he goes all the way to the end of the aisle and he takes a seat and reserves the next 5 seats over. I'm like, well, that's what you should have done to begin with. He goes, nobody else has a problem with it. I go, yes, everybody has a problem with it. Nobody thinks it's worth the effort to engage in a discussion with you about it. And the theater's not here enforcing their rules. It's not my rules, it's the theater's rules. The signs are all over the place. You can't claim ignorance to it. Why don't you get out and go wait for the next showing till your friends show up? Why should I have to leave the theater and go wait in another line because you're a few people ahead of me in the line and you're reserving seats for people who don't even have tickets? How's that fair to me? Nobody else cares. I go, well, I guess it's okay to break the rules as long as nobody complains. I guess that's how rules work. And it totally ruined the entire Avengers movie. I'm still upset about it. I didn't want to be placed in that position, but I also didn't get there an hour early to have some jerk block off an entire center section for his friends that couldn't be bothered to show up early. Like, to me, if you didn't show up early, then you don't care where you sit. So this is why I don't like to leave the house. My Cosmos 2 Ultra Tower wouldn't fit on that turntable Carrie is using. It would fall off. You know, I had the Cosmos 2 back in for a repair. Didn't I have it on this turntable? I thought I did. I'd have to look at the, let's see. Let me take a quick look in my library. You know, I'm getting so many videos now, it's hard for me to find the videos. Cosmos 2 computer repair. Okay, that's the video. And did I or did I not have this on the turntable? Yeah, it fits on the turntable just fine. No problems. We put a link in the chat room for you guys, and you can see for yourself that the Cosmos 2 fits on this turntable. No problem at all. There was room to spare. Carrie, do you have air conditioning on in your house? Yeah, it's 114 degrees outside. You better hope I have air conditioning on in my house. My fan on the AC unit is starting to make a lot of noise, so I'm going to have to go out there and fix that. That's my life. I'm fixing the car, I'm fixing computers, I'm fixing the air conditioner. That's what I do. What I'm happy about is usually when I fix something, it stays fixed. It's not that I'm fixing the same thing over and over and over again. At which point, probably best to hire somebody who knows what they're doing. I will eventually figure these buttons out. There we go. That's the shot I was trying to get. See, I kind of like the blue. Now that the room's getting a little darker. Let's see if we can give you a little virtual tour here. Look at the reflection of the camera. That's kind of cool. Looks like the camera's inside of the computer. Isn't that neat? It's just reflecting off of the water block. Let's take a closer look at that GPU. Oh, I want to take that support bracket off. That darn support bracket is so stupid. All right, so let's shut this thing down. I'm just gonna hit the power button here. And I'm gonna need my screwdriver. And it's powered off. We're gonna pull the power cable out, so we don't wanna accidentally short anything out. Keith Butler saying hello. Patrick Rousseau says those cables don't look so good. Not the management, the cables themselves. I wanted the white cables. I could have gone with black, you know, because the case is black. But I think the cables are going to look good. Once there's cable combs that we can put on here to make them look better. And then, you know, do the best I can with it. But I wanted the contrasting white cables against the black case, along with the white accents on the case. I think it's a nice pairing. But, you know, when you talk about things of what's considered attractive, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think it looks really good. I see the potential of where it's going to look a lot better once the cable combs are in, and once the slack is taken away, and once the window is put back on. I think it's going to be outstanding. But not everybody has the same taste, so. Or he's just saying the cables look thin. Well, don't let a thicker cable fool you. Monster cables used to make a lot of money off of people who thought like you do. And testing it time and time again proved that monster cables provided no better quality, or if there was a better quality, it was almost indistinguishable, but the price was almost 10 times more for a monster cable. And that was a fad for quite some time. I haven't really seen monster cables around in a long time. I don't even know if they're still in business, but I'm so glad that people aren't on that bandwagon anymore. I've never used custom cabling before, so this is the very first experience I've got with it. This was from BitFenix. I could have ordered from Cable Mods. And if I really want to get fancy, I could get my soldering iron out and I could cut these cables and crimp them and go full custom. But I just don't really want, it seems like a lot of work when I can just get some nylon zip ties. It's just not that important to me. Okay, so I want to get this bracket out of here. Let me do that right now. Let's take that. Take that. Yeah, I am not using that piece of junk. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to lift up on the graphics card so that the weight of it is going to be held by the screws and not the socket. And I want to make sure I don't lift it too high. I want to be able to have access to the HDMI port without it being blocked. That looks pretty good, right about there. Then we'll put this one here. And then, see, the problem was I wasn't able to secure these panels back in because of this really bad design of the support bracket. So I'm going to put the support bracket in the motherboard box and grab the other two thumb screws that used to be in there and put those back. But I'm pretty certain the support bracket is engineered in such a way as to make it mostly aesthetic. It doesn't really do much. Unless there's some other way to install it, it doesn't really seem to add much structural integrity to the graphics card. And maybe if it was being shipped or something like that, or being moved a lot, it could potentially prevent the card from moving too far. But then you add another obstacle in your way with the support bracket itself, as well as blocking additional hardware to be installed in the two slots here that the bracket prevents you from using. Or at least you have to be a little more creative with how you go about installing things and then using the bracket and lining the bracket up with a screw that you can then secure the bracket together with the PCI. It's just a pain. I mean, we're supposed to be evolving, moving forward with this stuff. And that seems like a huge, huge step backwards. And something NVIDIA never does. So again, stepping outside of my comfort zone with this build just because I can, because you guys have permitted me this opportunity, and the things I'm encountering like this are part of the reasons why you don't normally see me use this kind of hardware. Everything from trying to find a cooler that fits the Threadripper, which was one issue, to this support bracket for an AMD graphics card that NVIDIA graphics cards don't even offer as an option, to I don't know, was there anything else? Something else? I'm sure I can think of something. The case is wonderful to work on. It's a big case though. I mean, it's much wider than like a Corsair 200R. It's bigger, but it's got to be in order. You see the way that this kind of goes inward. And what's interesting is these slots here are where air gets drawn in, and the slots up at the top are where the air gets blown out. Which some people like, some people don't like that. Excuse me just a minute. Here, let me give that to you.
Oh, good.
All right, sorry about that, guys. Just had a package dropped off, so I had to take care of that. Gotta love when you shoot live. All right, so support bracket is out, and yeah, so pretty much just cable management. This is the one cable that's really bothering me, is this USB 3 cable and how it juts out so far. I'm not exactly sure what I can do about that. I wonder if you'll even be able to see it once the glass panel's in place. I mean, this whole bracket is here to hide cabling. So I keep sticking my finger in this hole thinking maybe I could run it up through this hole, but then I'm gonna have a long cable. This is shorter to keep it this way. I just don't know. It's stuff you just experiment with and decide what you prefer. Of course, here on the back, you'll see we've got our ports here for the graphics card, sound card. I've got the antenna headers for the built-in Wi-Fi, which I've not hooked up yet. And then, of course, our USB. We got lots of USB, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 USB, plus the USB 3.1. That's a total of 10. And then up at the front of the case, here on top, if I bring this down so you can see it, let me just grab an edge. And this is kind of heavy. Just taking the lazy Susan with it. Oh, come on. So you'll see we've got 2 USB 3s and 2 USB 2s. So we've got 4 here in the front with the headphone, microphone, and then our power right there. There is no reset button on this case. But it is pretty darn heavy. This is one of the heavier computers I've built. It's only going to get heavier when I put a tempered glass panel on it. So it's definitely not something I'm going to want to be moving around a lot unless I want to try testing how strong my back is. All right, guys, I think we're just about ready to wrap it up. I'm just, my phone is beeping like crazy at me, and I think it's all just strangers on the internet messaging me. So anyway, any final questions? I'd be happy to answer them at this point right now. Let me get my lights back on so you guys can see rather. The 400, the model 400 of this case is a micro ATX version, which I imagine it will also be heavy for its size. But I also can't deny the cable management is so well done. It's a very attractive looking case. I could do without all the RGB lighting, but it comes with it, and given how they've done it, it's not terrible. So I wouldn't recommend this case for a business because they certainly don't need a glass panel. That would actually be worse in a business because at that point you could have employees taking things and, you know, stealing a RAM module or something. That used to be a problem in businesses. And we just want everybody to have the same computer. And it's best that they can't see inside of them in a business environment. Ben says, I like the build, Kerry. You did a good job. Well, thanks, Ben. I appreciate that. It was a bit of a challenging build a little bit, but I had a great time building it. And like I say, still gotta fix the, pretty up the cabling, and I'll still play around with the lighting and download the software for the case lighting. Next week, I'll be putting the names of all the contributors on the case. We're using just a label maker, and we're going to go right down this white strip with the contributors' names. I have to basically create a spreadsheet with the names of the people who contributed and how much they contributed, and then I have to look through all the emails and tie them all together manually over what name that person wants me to put on there, because they may not want the name that they contributed under. They may have a gaming handle or a business name that they want to use, and there's not, I don't think there's 40 contributors. There's not many that contributed at $100 and above, so it won't take that long, but it is still a process I have to do before I start printing up labels. Robert wants to know if this build was refreshing for you. What this build was for me was, it was fun. Remember, I'm building computers that I'm always held accountable and responsible for. Not like other YouTube channels that build a machine and then maybe they use it themselves, or they send the parts back to the manufacturer because they did their review. When I build, I'm held accountable and responsible for the life of that computer anytime something goes wrong, whether or not it's a power supply that fails or the customer gets a virus. And I want it to be that way. That's how I sustain a business. I want the customers to call me when things go wrong. And ideally, it won't be a warranty call. And ideally, they'll be so happy with their purchase that when they're thinking of buying another computer, or they know anybody who wants to buy a computer, that they will refer them to me. So that's the whole process. This computer, I'm not building it for anybody. So there's a sense of freedom I haven't felt in 20 years to actually build a machine that sometimes it feels like there's a gun to your head. Or like, build it, hurry, we need it yesterday. When's it done? Is it done? But if you rush it through, you're going to have problems with it, and it's going to make you look incompetent to the customer. They're going to lose their faith in your competency, and they may not want to do any more business with you or refer you to anybody. So you have to be able to tell the customer, it's done when it's done, sit tight, I'm working on it, in a polite, friendly way, and then try and nail it right out of the gate. You know, make sure that when you drop that computer off, that you're not going to immediately get a call that the front USB doesn't work, my headphones don't work, there's no sound coming out. Try and resolve all that and test it as best you can, not with benchmarking software, but actually plug things into the USB ports and see if it recognizes them. Plug headphones into the jack, see if sound comes out. These little tiny things make the difference between a good computer and a great computer. And when you can deliver a computer and have it run without any problems, get it plugged into their network, and the customer just has to start installing software, that's great. The customer doesn't have to download any Windows updates. The customer doesn't have to download any drivers. The customer doesn't have to do any network configuration. And if the customer needs help with getting their email and their printer set up, and their QuickBooks, Quicken, whatever utilities, Microsoft Office, I charge them for that, no problem, no problem. So what was refreshing, again, is that this is just for fun. This doesn't matter. Nobody's waiting for it. If it breaks, there's no emergency. It makes building fun again. It's sort of like when you're gaming and you enjoy playing a game, or a sport and you enjoy playing, let's say, baseball. So you decide to join a team or a clan, as the case may be for gaming. And now you have to be at the game. If you don't show up, there won't be enough players. They'll have to forfeit. There's a lot of pressure on you to show up. It's always going to be, you know, this day at this time. And it might start out being fun, but eventually starts becoming a job. It becomes a responsibility. People are counting on you. Not only counting on you to play well, but counting on you to be there. And now you can't do other things you might want to do because you've obligated yourself to this thing that you like to do for fun. That's now become a burden and a responsibility. It's now become a weight you're voluntarily carrying on your shoulders. So that's what's happened with me. I get into computers because it's fun. I started doing it for businesses. Businesses get real serious because it involves a whole lot of money. And people don't have a sense of humor when they're losing money. They want good value for their money. And when there's a problem, they need you to stop everything you're doing and come fix it immediately, because every minute they're down, they're losing money. So it's a bit like being a fireman. You know, you've got to be available at the drop of a hat. And if you're not, they'll find somebody else who is. That sucks a lot of the fun out of it. I mean, I still enjoy it, but enjoying something and having fun are two different things. This I had fun with. Alessandro Migliorni says, ciao from Italy. Migliorini, I think that's how you say his name. Someone in the chat room is asking what this is for. It's mostly there for looks. You can actually take this out if you don't like it. It doesn't have to be in there. You'll see there's a slot or a groove cut in it, and that's where you can put a liquid reservoir. If you're building your own cooler, you could stick it right in the, you know, mount it against the slot. Assuming your graphics card wouldn't get in the way like this one appears to. But yeah, you'd have to put a shorter graphics card in there to use that. It's mostly just for looks, really. It's also a great way to hide the cables, but that goes back to just for looks, doesn't it? When you make your hobby the job, it will never be a hobby again. Yeah, well, you know, the difference between a job and a hobby is whether or not you're spending money or making money. That's it. That's how the IRS defines it. So for example, if you started a new business as a computer technician and you posted losses instead of profits, I think 3 years in a row, the IRS will tell you this is not a job and you can no longer deduct it. This is your hobby. I could be wrong on the years. I'm not an accountant, but there's a certain number of how many years you can take a loss before the IRS goes, it's not a job. And the courts will consider you an expert if you've worked in a field for a minimum of 7 years where you were paid to do the job on a full-time basis. The courts will consider you an expert. It has nothing to do with what degrees you hold. It has to actually do from personal experience, what you do and how long you've been doing it and being paid to do it. So the difference between a professional and a hobbyist is a professional is paid by a third party, by a customer, to do the work, and it has to be over a certain period of time, full-time or reasonably close to full-time, for a minimum amount of time to properly use the term professional in a legal sense here in the United States. When you're just an enthusiast or a hobbyist, a lot of people call themselves pros, but by no standards would they be accepted in a court of law for expert testimony, because they wouldn't be the expert. Doing something you love on your free time is one thing. Being forced to do it 5 days a week makes it less fun quickly. I work 7 days a week. I work every single day of the week, and I probably put in 12 to 16 hours a day. So one of the things they don't tell you about being self-employed is you don't get to clock out, and every minute you spend not working is money you're losing. So it's a choice, but it can be hard to go out and take a vacation when you have to worry about, well, what happens if one of my clients calls me and I'm 2,000 miles away? And what about all this work that I still have to do? It'll have to be put off until I get back, which means I won't be able to bill for it until I get it done. So one of the advantages of working for somebody else is to clock out physically and mentally. I'm still learning how to clock out mentally. I got a long way to go. All right, guys, I'm gonna let you go here. Hold on a second. Hold on. I think I hear my landscapers, and things are about to get really loud. I gotta put the doggy door down so the dogs stay. And it's gonna get really loud, because they're gonna bring out all the lawn equipment. And how about if I just end this before that happens? Thanks again for watching. Thanks for all your support and contributions. I'll be back next week to do the naming ceremony. I should have all the cable management ready and the back panel on. And then I've got a couple short videos I want to make on hard drive security racing and uninterruptible power supplies. I want to do a video on that and show you guys how they work and why you might want one and why you probably think you want one when you find out all the negative parts of owning one. I might just change your mind. All right, I'll see y'all again very soon. Until then, bye for now.